Awesome.
All right, I think we're live. Let us know if you can hear us in the chat. Welcome. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Marie.
Welcome to this chat about online courses. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to chat with you about this. I know that we're both pretty nerdy about this topic. We get pretty excited about it. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you became the online course guy. Like, how did you stumble upon your business right now is Curious Lion Learning, but you're now the program director of On Deck, the online course fellowship, right? It's like the first inaugural one. So how exactly did online courses become your thing?
Yeah. So first of all, it's so cool to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week, and super excited to geek out. And if anybody in the audience has questions for us, I'm happy to jump into those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in sort of the enterprise side of adult education for about 15 years, working at a company called KPMG, and worked at a startup, did their learning as we were doing selling training to the hospitality industry. And then for the last 5 years, I've had Curious Lion, which has also been helping other companies create training. Cool. And so I've always been first of all, always just drawn to teaching others, and that's always been something. So I always enjoyed delivering that as a service and helping create products for companies. And then I've also just been a huge fan of online courses like you. And so I've taken a bunch and I learned so much from them. And and things really took off with that last year, right? Where we suddenly had a lot more time, and I signed up for a bunch of courses. Yeah, and I did, and then I had this amazing opportunity I was selected as an alumni mentor for David's Rite of Passage, and that was in July. And that's really the turning point of where I started to realize the things that the sort of experience I built up over 15 years in like corporate setting was actually so transferable to what, I really started with David's course, started to learn, see behind the scenes and how he was thinking about it and how he's building it. And I was like, all right, this is actually there's portable skills here that I can help with this type of stuff. And so at that point, I started writing about it online. And this is such a great lesson for anyone. I'm blown away how quickly this happened for me, but just starting to write and for that audience of course creators, and people started to pick up on that. I think you started seeing some of that. You and I had an amazing podcast where I reached out to you and you were just like, yeah, let's do it. And that took me completely by surprise. And then Ali Abdal reached out to me at one point when I posted that I was going to be joining his course, and he was like, Andrew, I need to talk to you. I want to make my course amazing. Can you come help? And I'm like, what?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening?
It was crazy. And yeah, I jumped to that. I got involved with him and helped him with their mentor peer supporter program. And yeah, it's just kind of snowballed from there. And so to kind of long story short, the end of last year, I was approached by Eric Torenberg from On Deck. And I know this world is sort of kind of new for a lot of people in course creation. So we can get into that. I think a lot of people in our sort of corner of Twitter have started to really see On Deck in a big way in the last sort of month and a half as I joined, as Robbie Crabtree joined, and a lot of programs around for creators specifically. But yeah, Eric reached out. They'd been thinking about creating a course for course creators. And him and I just chatted, and it was just a mind meld. It was we thought about it the exact same way. And so, yeah, it sort of I jumped at it and signed on with them at the end of last year, and here I am now.
Incredible. Yeah, I'm so curious about some of the courses that you've taken, because again, I know we're sort of in some similar Twitter circles, and we're familiar with rites of passage and building a second brain. What for you are some of those courses that you think kind of exemplify what you're trying to do with online courses?
Yeah. So rite of passage, building a second brain, I think would pioneer courses. Well, I trace this back. I think the type of course that's transformational, and that's sort of the thing that I find most resonating with is to Seth Godin's Alt MBA, and I think that set the trend for a lot of this, where it was not before that MOOCs, right? MOOCs, massive online courses would be okay, we can now take the university lecture experience, we can put it online, and we can, instead of 100 people, we can have 100,000 people, and it sounded amazing, but it didn't transform anyone, right? And so completion rates are like 10%, 5%, and it's just and so I think what Seth and Wes Carr were doing with the Alt MBA was to say, well, how do we actually introduce accountability and peer-to-peer learning and all these kind of the things that we see now in your course and the course creators we're working with and what we're building it on deck, where those elements are the most important elements, right? Like that element of community and all that. So so I think those are good examples. I think what Ali Abdal's doing with Part-Time YouTube Academy is incredible. Like he's really pushing the boundaries there of what can be done, which is amazing. I think August Bradley as well with his Notion course. I think He as well with his. Obviously, yours as well. And I've had a chance to get behind the scenes of that, and you and I have had a chance to chat about that. And it's just awesome. Like I think everyone has this, and this is what I love about what we're going to do with On Deck. Everyone I mentioned there is a founding fellow. Like that blows my mind. Like just the fact that people are going to have an opportunity to learn from you guys. And what you're doing, and you're gonna then have, and I know a lot of you all talk to each other as well, but have this sort of best practice sharing of what's really working in terms of creating student transformations. That's very exciting.
Love it. And let's talk for a second, because I know that we've talked about this before, about some of the trends that we've seen in online courses, and like we'll get into what makes a transformational course, but what are some of the trends that you've seen? Like I know we've talked about how in the marketing world, online courses kind of had a little bit of a bad rap, and it almost seemed like everyone and their grandma has an online course, and it's just repackaged blog posts, and they're not transformational. The completion rates are super low. So I'm curious about your thoughts on like that, like what makes terrible online courses, and why do you think online courses have a bad rap, right? And so I'd just love to hear your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, let's paint the picture of that, because that's a perfect counterpoint to, I think, what you're doing with Notion Mastery, what everyone we've mentioned so far is doing with their online courses. So, I talked about the MOOCs, which are primarily like institution driven, like universities then putting their content online. And then I think the people that were able to then get the most scale once everyone realized like, oh, we can teach at scale online, were marketers, right? And so they were able to create really sexy landing pages, really clever funnels that they put people through, webinars starting in 16 minutes, like every hour on the hour, like little like marketing gimmicks like that, which got a lot of people into these things. And you captured what they did so well, which is just repackaged blog content. Like, so to me, it's the difference between the transfer of knowledge or the transfer of information and the transformation of students. Like that's the big difference there. And so people would sign up for these things, and you get access to all this content, all these bonuses and upgrades and whatever. And then it was just this like information dump, and like, okay, if you made something of it, was that really helpful to you? Maybe you had that transformation yourself, but it had to be driven by the individuals. And that's really hard to do on your own, right? Like learning Notion with yours, like people need that community support. They need the office hours you do. They need each other to like to learn from each other. So so I think that's the big difference, is then these marketers, when they were not getting the transformation, so you don't get students leaving telling everyone else, and you get the growth rate that comes from that, is they spent all their time optimizing the funnel. So that was the focus. The course completely loses the attention. So instead of looking at
like an afterthought.
Totally. And that's the most important part. Like it's the student experience. So I think that's pretty the biggest thing, and that sort of was the catalyst, I think, to start to get these things on the map. But unfortunately, it's given it a bit of a bad name as well.
Yeah. So this whole, move toward the transformational online courses feels like it's in reaction to, there's a better way to do this, right? There's a better way. Like we need to make better teachers, right? And we need to help people who have something to teach, have the tools and knowledge and wisdom and knowing how to translate that into actual change of their students, right? So we know that's not an easy thing, right? Where have people gone traditionally to even learn those skills, or kind of what trends have you been seeing? Because online courses have been around for a while, right? And so what's been like, where did someone like David or Tiago, where did they learn how to create the kind of courses that they're creating now?
That's such a good question, because I think a lot of people will agree. I believe that almost everyone has an online course in them, that if you are able to help an individual person with something that you're good at or that you know a lot about, you can help a lot of people. Yeah. But you need to learn how to teach. Teaching is a skill, and it's not something that comes naturally to everyone. But like any skill, you can learn it. And that's sort of the sort of niche that I've focused in on now. But I think to answer your question, I've thought a lot about and I think I attended a workshop that Tiago hosted. It was the first time I'd met David. Was this workshop in Brooklyn, 2019, and it was like, I think it was a writing based workshop. So it was sort of David's workshop. Tiago brought the audience of his side. It was when David was just getting started, and it just blew me away. Like, it was just this amazing hour. It was all in a room, obviously, but we all got together. There was an exercise. It was just from a pedagogical perspective, it was so well done that there was like a little mini transformation at the end of it. And I stayed behind and I was chatting to them, and then I asked them, none of them have studied this stuff. So I think it sort of comes intuitively to some people, right? Some people are born teachers and can understand like some of the key principles of, peer-to-peer learning and like the importance of prompts to action, like the activities that they designed for us, like really did help embed what they were saying. And also they just focused on like one or two things as opposed to just trying to do a brain dump for an entire hour. Like a couple of those principles that, I think came naturally to them. And there are very few people, Ali's another one, Robbie Crabtree's another one, who are like, I think, naturally good teachers. You may correct me if I'm wrong, but you come across as one as well, where you get like, maybe you went and studied this that I don't know about, but you sort of, it's like, it's about, the big thing is really just focusing on the student, their experience and that transformation, right? So I think, where did they learn? I don't, and so I think they're intuitively got it. That's a very rare combination when someone's exceptionally good at a domain of experience, but also a good teacher. And so for those that are not already good teachers, where do they go to learn it? There isn't really somewhere. Like, that's the other, I was like, this was the thing that really sort of struck me, was that there isn't like a central place that's teaching this. A lot of people who teach you how to create an online course, but it's actually really how to market an online course.
I was just going to ask you about that too, because like being a good teacher is one thing, but if you don't have the marketing chops or the marketing know-how, how do you actually get people to learn about your course? And I think a lot of teachers or people online, that's the part that's scariest. It's like, oh, I know how to make content, but like, how do I build an audience around that content? So obviously, like with the marketing, the teaching, what are some of those other skills that you think the creator kind of needs to have in order to be able to kind of pull off a transformational course?
So it is such a, I love that you've hit a few there. Actually, marketing is 100% such an important part of it. So you have to have that sort of arrow in your quiver, and you need to, and there are a lot of great experts that cover that, which is fantastic. You said content creation, like that is also, you have to be good at that. And be able to put out quality content. That's, you have to be a decent writer. You have to be a decent, if you're doing a live thing, be able to speak on camera and, all those kind of things. But that also isn't enough. Like, you also have to figure out how you can present a bunch of content to people, but then you're still just transferring information, right? You're not transforming students. And that's I think the next piece of it, which is to know how to transform, how to design learning experiences, basically, like how, and there's a lot of that. There's three big things. I know, like, actually, we'll come back to that if we want to, but there's another piece as well, which is like the infrastructure and marketing, or you talk about the infrastructure, basically the automations, like that's another
whole
huge
system.
Totally. Like, and right now it's a lot of like cobbling together of different no code stuff, and there are a lot of great platforms that are now starting to pop up that will solve these problems, but that's another huge piece of it. And then hiring as well. Like, how you can't just do this on your own, right? So
I saw you tweet about this recently. You were saying, your first hire should be like was it the program manager or like the course manager? And so you had a list of, hey, be aware, these are some roles you're going to want to hire for. But I'm curious, how do you get to that point when you're like, if you're just starting your online course, you're just creating it, maybe you don't have the funds to hire a team yet, like, how do you get to the point where you have enough infrastructure to get launched, but not so much that you're like, I can't afford, there's just so many decisions to be made. Like, how do you even get to that first next step?
So I would actually love to get your thoughts on this as well, because at some point you go from the course to a business, and I know you think a lot about that, and you do have to take that risk. That it's a leverage thing, right? So like you do have to spend a bit of money to get that leverage to allow you to scale. But before that step, I think it's so important to validate that sort of product audience fits, right? Like that you can actually not just that so you can help one-on-one. That's great. That often can again now, like, that's valuable service or advice or whatever that you offer. So now you think about the way I like to recommend this is to do a sort of a small cohort of 5 or 10 sort of friends and family type people, where they know. I mean, it actually doesn't even have to be. I think now with like building in public, you can find strangers who like latch onto an idea and be like, yeah, I want to help you with that, right? So they know they're helping. It's like the formative stages. They get to be part of that, give you feedback. I still think you should charge well for that, because people then have skin in the game, and it creates the right sort of actual real life circumstances that you're trying to validate, right? So you can probably charge a discounted rate or an early bird rate or something, and just go through it, especially if you're starting with a live component, which is probably, if you're really not sure about the idea, one of the best ways to validate it, because you get that instant feedback loop. And run through that. So I have a failed online course in my past. 2 years ago, I did a course.
Don't we all?
I know, right? It's like almost like talk about rite of passages. Exactly.
Yeah, tell me more about it.
Yeah, so I had a side business. It's still sort of going, but it helps. It's a lead gen business, helping people get B2B leads and sort of cold email, but it started with LinkedIn. And so I was like, I figured out sort of a system that worked for me, and maybe I can teach people how to do this. And I had 2 beta cohorts. And this was the part that worked really well, because I got tons of feedback. I then put a lot of time and thought into the content, and I felt confident on what the programming and all that looked like. And I got a lot of great feedback from those people. But then comes the next step. And this is where I'd love to sort of get your thoughts in. But as I had to then scale this, I built up a list, and I had like, I don't know, 500 or 600 people on the list through some of the blogging and stuff I was doing. But I think probably 100 of those, if lucky, were like reading this stuff. And I just wasn't like, my heart wasn't in it. And I think this is the other key thing, is like, you've got to be passionate about the topic. You have to care about it, because it's a lot of work.
It's a commitment. Right? Yeah.
You got to put value out there and like build that audience. You got to keep at that for months. And so that was a big part of why I couldn't keep that thing going or sort of get it off the ground. But I think that the cohorts, sort of the small cohort size thing, is a good way to start.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Doing it in beta first, and just like working out all the kinks, not pre-planning too much of the content, but kind of co-creating it with that first cohort and really honing it in. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think people. Go ahead. Were you gonna?
Yeah, no. Well, I'm just curious, as you start to scale as well, how you thought about that, because like that's a hard part of I think of this, is when you do have to sort of make a bit of an investment in yourself to then how do you sort of go over that bridge or think about crossing it?
How do I even answer that? I mean, like in terms of when to go all in, or if you should go all in, or kind of how do you?
And also, like, I mean, there's this temptation, right? I think that you've done it now. You can do this all on your own, but it's a ton of work. And so there's this like letting go, like, okay, I bring people in, I'm going to have to pay them. What if it doesn't work? Like, those kind of issues.
Yeah. And I guess I think I brought on my assistant within a first month of launching. I think I was like, I should probably hire like a virtual assistant and get some help with it. Like, I think I had a sense that, okay, if this is growing, I'm probably going to need like help on the administrative side, and I still have my client work and whatnot. And so when my course I'd say my course spent about 4 or 5 months in beta. Like, it felt like it was still in beta. I was still working on it. I was kind of thinking I could do it in 6 weeks. It ended up taking much longer. But as it was growing month by month, I was like, I'm going to need support with this. I'm definitely going to need some more help. So I actually had my assistant help a little bit more on the client side. So she was able to handle more of what my clients were doing, which gave me more time to kind of really dive into the course and really kind of workshop it. I still probably will never feel like it's done. But now I've actually just hired her full time in the last couple of weeks. So that's been a big move that I've made. So I just kind of kept increasing her hours month over month. And I don't know how I would have done it without the support of another person for sure, even if it's just those administrative tasks to help you get that stuff off your plate. So I was pretty all in pretty early on. I was like, okay, there's momentum here. Like, I'm going to have to commit to this. Am I willing to go all in on this? And I was like, yeah, I am. Like, let's see where this goes.
Yeah. I like that you start with like small, you portioned off some of the work and then added and then added and added. I think that's a good way to, from both, also just to find that you're working with the right person. That's another thing as well. You don't want to like go all in, and so that's good advice.
Gail had a question here about, when considering making an online course, what factors do you consider to see if the premise of the course has long-term appeal or more dependent on current trends? Interesting. Yeah, the long-term appeal. And is that something that, do you help people with the initial decision-making in terms of that product market fit, or are you more working with people who they know that there's a fit and they're all in on it and they kind of just, they want to make it amazing?
Yeah, so I think for the on deck, for the fellowship, and actually all the sort of clients I've advised on, it's more people who have an online course or have a validated idea, which could be through another product, it could be through a coaching service, it could be through consulting, a lot of different things, but now want to add an online course as a way to scale their reach and their impact. So generally, we don't spend a ton of time there on validating. I think there's, again, a lot of people who really help focus on that as a phase that you need to sort of go through. But in terms of, I think what I might say to Gail is that, first of all, great question. I think the main, might sound like kind of airy-fairy, but if you genuinely believe and have seen evidence that you've created a transformation in one person, like you've literally changed their life for the better in whatever way that is, then I think you've got long-term appeal. Like, because like, why wouldn't more people want that from you?
Like, chances are, if you've done it for one person, there's other people that have that need.
Yeah. Unless it was like so specific and customized. Like, I just think like, that means you've got an ability to help people with something and to help improve their life in some way or their business in some way. So that's why I say, like, I think everyone has an online course in them in some way.
Yeah, and Gail, I would just, similar to Andrew, it's like, where have you experienced that transformation before? Is it one-on-one, right? Like, I think often courses fall out of your one-on-one services, right? Like, there's just evidence, you've seen the change, you know the nuances. It's like a problem that you're willing to double down on and work on. So if you've worked with people on that before and you have evidence of it and you're excited enough to kind of go all in on that problem, then I think that the part about trends is kind of interesting too, right? Because even that's something I was a little bit nervous about too. I'm like, Notion is exploding right now, right? People are saying, I'll give you money if you make a course on this. And I was nervous. I'm like, do I want to go all in on it? And do I only want to be known for this technology, right? I have so many other things that I do in my business, but now most people know me through Notion. So that was something I was like, is this a trend I'm willing to jump on? And it was
we talked about we talked about this on the podcast. I think this was so fascinating that you felt like you didn't want to get pigeonholed as like just Notion, and we said that, you know, we got to the point, like, you are teaching people how to think. Like, that was the broader thing, right? And I think that's something I do also help people a little bit with, is just it's almost coming with a beginner's mindset to that thing that you do, right? Because a lot of, like, when you're in it, you're so, I have the same thing with courses. Like, I'm so in this world, I don't know from the outside. That was kind of, you know, that outside validation of like, hey, this is super helpful. You should probably start writing more about this. People need that, right? And so I think that's like another thing is having someone who can be that beginner's mind, bring that beginner's mind approach to say, like, hey, actually, no, this thing you're doing is really cool, and this is what I think it's doing, as opposed to like, I'm teaching Notion. No, you actually taught me how to think. You know, like that's a great example, I think of it. Yeah.
Yep. I think part of it is just being a great listener, right? Like you're always just kind of listening for that feedback. It's how are people talking about this in comments? How are my clients reflecting this back to me? What are those things that people always sort of compliment you on or say, oh, wow, thank you. You helped me X, right? And so I've got that love notes database where I'm clipping all that stuff, because when someone does say, oh, like, it's actually a course that shows me how to live better, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Could I lean into that more in the course? What would that look like? So just keep feeding that feedback loop, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Love that. Mushi was saying, structure for them, I feel like, is a huge thing. Yes. So even like structuring your online course, I think is a huge challenge. I know I find that very challenging too, is like deciding what comes before what, and how do you kind of lay out that path of transformation. I'm curious, kind of how do you approach that? Do you take a bit of a reverse engineering of what is that ultimate transformation you want to take a student through? And then do you kind of reverse engineer some checkpoints? How do you think about approaching the transformation?
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's the key. I always say, so first of all, be very clear with who it is that you're teaching. Then be very clear what the transformation is. Usually it's action-oriented outcome. There's a verb in there they will be able to do this. Like it's some like thing that they can do differently. And action is key. And that's one of the three, I think, most important things in a course. One of them is to prompt people to action. So outline that transformation. Then figure out where they come in at, and they're from in pedagogy and adult education. Like the number one thing you need to know about students to design any course is prior experience. Like there's no actually statistically proven. Like there's nothing else that makes a big difference on the outcomes of that course. So that's really key. Like get an idea of where they come in, and that also varies. So that helps you then go, so some people are beginners, some are experienced. Like Notion's a great example. You might have people join who like know Notion, and like want to know more about your way of using it, and then you have some who start at the beginning, and you need to cater for that. So now you've got who the student is, the transformation, and the where they're coming in at, and then you 100%, like you said, you reverse engineer that process, and the steps then to get from A to B are so key, and those are things that you should signpost and make super clear for the students at all times during the course, so they know this is where I'm going, this is where I'm at now, and this is where I've been. So they always like have that reference point for the journey.
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely working on in my course to make better, so people don't feel like there's like a sea of amazing information you can dip into, but like where am I in this process? Where am I taking you on? So I think that's definitely hard. It's hard to do really well, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean that's one little thing will make a huge difference to like all the great content you really got. That's sort of like the difference we were talking earlier between being really good at content creation and being able to translate that into a teaching thing. Like that's one example of how to elevate the content.
It's so tough. And so let's talk a little bit about course formats, right? Because we've talked about live cohorts, right? And like this is becoming very big, very popular, these sort of large cohort-based courses, like Ali's doing that, Rites of Passage, Building a Second Brain, they all do these big cohorts. I'd love to hear from you, what you think, again, what are some of those trends that you're seeing that you think there's a reason that these courses are transformational, because there's a live component, there's, and like how it's paced. So what do you think, I guess, what are your opinions on that, of like, what is it that a great transformational course has to have, and where is there room for some nuance? Because I know there's been a bit of a evergreen courses, like you can't experience change in an evergreen course or a self-study course. Is that true? And I would just love to hear kind of some of what you've seen or what you think.
And I'm fascinated in your viewpoint on this, and we talked about this a lot. And that's why I was so excited about you joining as a founding fellow, because I think there is a lot of nuance to this, and a lot of people think like your Notion Mastery course isn't just evergreen. Like I'd say it's almost like evergreen forward. It's
like a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, but it's a hybrid. You offer like office hours, and you have guest workshops, and you do a lot of, so there is a community that people can talk to each other, meet each other, and even host community events and stuff. Like there's a lot of that's happening. But it's not, so the cohort based thing is often also like it's a sprint. It's a 5 to 6 week learning sprint, which delivers a very specific outcome, well-defined outcome at the end. Whereas yours is more, I think, like people can take it whenever, and it's more, it's year round, it's forever in terms of access, and the content constantly gets refreshed. So it's also just a different consumption
style
approach. So for people, right? But again, because of those other live elements you mentioned, there is accountability, there is community, so you do get transformation. It's not just, oh, now you got this like you said, like a repackaged blog post. It's a lot more than that. So yeah, I think those.
Yeah, it's like we have to factor in the teacher, like there's the teacher's needs too, right? Or even the teacher's style, right? Some teachers are going to almost lend themselves better to a certain style, right? Whether it's some teachers like are really great on their feet versus others can do really great sort of pre-recorded video. So I imagine that even between the type of topic matter, like some content would probably even lend itself well to certain types of content, like, oh, that works better as pre-recorded versus live, or that sort of thing. And then you have student preferences, right? So we've got people with different types of disabilities that maybe they're not able to attend live, or they've got whatever family restrictions that prevent them from always being able to make the live events at the same time, right? So there's so many different factors at play when we're talking online courses. I don't think there's necessarily one recipe for how an online course has to look.
Yeah, and a lot of this gets stirred up on Twitter, like with just the classic shit posting, which I think is designed to kind of get that debate going. But like we were saying before, that's important because the nuances then come out of like why. I think you gave me this idea of thinking about it from the teacher's perspective as well. Of like, that's actually, it's a lifestyle choice. It's a business setup choice as well, right? And I think that's an important thing to factor into this.
Even the business model too, right? Like the fluctuations of cash throughout the year, like that's another thing to consider.
For CBC, like that's like, I mean, you got these 2 or 3 massive, that's basically what we're doing with our On Deck one, where it works really well in On Deck because there are lots of different fellowships doing this all the time. So there's a much more smoother income. But when you're just the only business owner doing it, that can be stressful. It can be very lucrative, but it can also be very stressful. And so it's a decision you have to make as the business owner.
Yeah, I wanted to find a way to minimize that crazy launch cycle where your income is kind of dependent on a couple times a year, and you're like, hope it all works, and you're putting all of this marketing firepower into these key points in the season. I prefer a much more a little bit of like a slow and steady, where like, I casually mention the course in my newsletter sometimes I don't. I blog about it, I talk about it in different ways. So I'm kind of always talking about my course, but in a really more casual way. It's like, oh, you want to learn more? Like, come on in and check it out. But I'm not kind of fire hosing people with that. That's much more my style. It's more like, hey, invitational, friendly, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that works for me. That, it doesn't mean I can't do a cohort if I want to, but it means that there's a bit more of a steady income across the whole year, which is very appealing. So
I think for many, and I think that's actually a great point you make, is that there is a lot of flexibility if you don't lock into I'm only going to do Evergreen, I'm only going to do CBC. Like you right now with your course have the option to do a sprint in any time. You could say, hey, for the next 5 weeks, we're going to go do a bunch of live sessions. We're going to go through this together. And like, you could turn that on whenever you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just love that flexibility. And I just don't think there is one ultimate style, of course, right? I think it really depends on what's your capacity, what's your ability, availability, how you want to structure it. Like right now I have an assistant coach too. And so she can run her own like beginner office hours or do, onboarding sessions for new students. So even though technically people can join whenever, at least once a month, there's always a sort of, it's almost like a signposting onboarding, like, hey, welcome to the course. You might've been dipping into the content. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. Let's make sure that you feel like you know where to go next and that sort of thing. So we can do that once a month,
Yeah. So how did you know to do that? Like, there's no playbook for this. Did you just intuit that this is something like, oh, were you getting feedback from students? Like, how did you get to that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say over the years, I've worked with a couple different instructional designers. I worked with Stacey Howe a lot. We partnered up on a course called Run Your Learning Launch that was like getting people shipping their courses earlier. Like, let's get you shipping something, validating it very quickly, and getting practice doing that. So I have worked with a couple folks over the years, and then in the last 2 years, I've been working with Mariah Cause. She is incredible. I did her accelerator program for online courses, and so she has a pretty interesting like evergreen model that this is kind of what she teaches is evergreen all year round. And then if you want to launch twice a year, you can do that. You actually shut your evergreen funnel down while you're doing the live cohort, and then you kick it back up again once that cohort is over. So you have kind of the best of both worlds. So she teaches a very specific model. I don't follow it exactly. Like, I don't have this super well-oiled evergreen funnel, but the course is just always available if you need it. I don't use the countdown timers and that sort of thing. But I took a lot of those principles. I like that concept of you can make it into a stable income if you want to. You can get creative about it. It doesn't have to be these sprints and cohorts. And I think also, again, the nature of different types of courses. In my case, I get people from every age, every country, every intention of what they want to do with the tool. It was really hard to streamline that to like, who is the type of person? Like, how do I boil this down to one type when people, like you said, have different experience levels? I was like, I don't think I can force people into a cohort for this kind of material. Yes, I could do some learning sprints and say, oh, I'm noticing a lot of coaches are taking the course. That's really interesting. Let's do a learning sprint for coaches. But in general, it just felt too difficult to try and say, we're going to take everyone through the exact same process. No way. People are at totally different levels. So one thing I really like that Mariah said was 1 week into a cohort-based course and everyone's already at a different level. I was like, she's not wrong.
You know, it's so true. It's so true. So we should talk about that a bit as well. But I want to come back to what you said, because I think mentors is such a key part of helping that for those that are doing cohort-based courses. But what I love about what you just described there and what you do is that it's not like you said, it's not you're not sort of you're not tricking people into joining your course through like these clever funnels and tripwires and stuff. It gives you this ability to just keep putting out great content, which you enjoy doing. And you've made it easy for people then who want to find out more to like get into the funnel, as it were. And that's the way to think about it, I think.
It's definitely a little bit more passive, right? Like, I probably could be doing a better effort with my marketing, but again, it's kind of a lifestyle business. It's like, I want to be able to make videos when I want to make them and not feel this, like I'm on the hamster wheel of like churning things out and like optimizing the funnel. I was like, that's not really where I want to spend my time. I would rather spend my time making the course content videos way more awesome and leveling up the content, improving the signposting. Like, I really want to make the course itself super high level. So marketing is kind of secondary for me.
Totally. And you can then also even outsource that. And
hey, look, we've got Ali Abdal in the house, which up, again, we both went through Ali's course, right? And I've said to people before, I know both of us have taken a lot of online courses, and I will say Ali Abdal's part-time YouTuber Academy was up there and one of the best courses that I've ever taken. I was blown away by the quality of the content, the teaching. Seriously, I was so impressed. And I had a friend of mine that also just signed up for this cohort that was like, I just need to thank you for recommending that course. That was incredible. So I'm sure you would.
I think Ali's course is a great example of what we were just talking about now. Where, and by the way, shout out to Regina. I see you there as well. One of our on deck team joining. So I think what Ali did so well with it, you mentioned how people after week 1, week 2, they are like all at different points, and this was his thing. This is sort of what him and I worked on at the beginning, and now they've taken to another whole level. Is this the peer supporter groups? Yes, which was such a great way. It's this difference between the destination and the journey. where, you know, Ali sets the destination. Like everyone wants to have a channel with 1.5 million subscribers, and he shows you how to get there, right? He's got those 6 steps and like 6 things to focus on, and then they get broken down into 3 things, and it's just very clear, like, okay, this is what we're going to cover. But first of all, as a beginner especially, you can't cover all of that. You'll never complete that journey in the first taking, right? So you focus on certain parts of it, you get good at those. And this is what Charlotte Crowther does really well. She helps you visualize that, right? And then like, okay, now I'm going to focus on conceive and you know, capture and build. And like, so you get there eventually. And the journey groups help you with that, because you can then work with people who are also focusing on that, just the next step, right? Not Ali's like 6 steps, but the very next step you need to take. And you're finding people that are on that same level of the journey as you. So that's, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that was such just quality format. And so how much were you a part of helping define the shape of the course?
Yeah, so I mean, so Ali, I think, has been very generous in saying that I was a big part of it. And I, you know, but I learned a lot from him. It was interesting because, so he, like I said, he reached out to me on Twitter. We jumped on a call. We spent an hour talking about this. He was taking a lot of notes, and he's like a massive sponge. He just like absorbs all this stuff, and then has all these, and then suddenly comes back with these like super intuitive, like, you know, responses to it. And it was that kind of conversation. And at the end of it, he said, "Hey, do you want to, you know, run this one for me?" So we did. But he actually, you know, at that point I was talking about destination and journeys, but it was mentors and sort of more like alumni mentors, people who had maybe a bit more experience than the students coming in and had experience in the program. And this was his first cohort. So he was like, you know, I don't really want to do mentors. I don't want to call them mentors. I'm going to do peer supporters. And so then I was like, I just revised my whole learning ladder of like destination, and then, you know, the 2 types of journey groups. So you got a mentor and then a peer supporter. And the peer supporter is literally just 1 step ahead of the students coming in. Yeah. And that makes a huge difference. It's like, so you get these, you know, what practical that looks like are these hosted sessions that, and so this is a great sort of anecdote to it. So, you know, Ali did a session one night, was on gear, right? And sort of freaked a lot of people out about like how much gear they needed to get. And everybody thought they needed to get like what he has. And now normally, if you are just doing destination content in a cohort-based type course, you're waiting till, you know, at best, the next time you do a live session, at worst, when you get your feedback forms filled out at the end of your course, right? By then, way too late. Yeah. But he had a session, Bhav Sharma, who I know you know, had a session for the peer support group that night. They got this feedback from people, sent it to Ali. He put together a video and released that the same day for people, clarifying like the whole gear thing. And it was amazing because, you know, like with people coming into your course, any course, like there's that anxiety, like it's a, you know, there's a tension to learning, especially when you're getting out of your comfort zone, right? And if you can help, and that's like one of the things you want to really fix as soon as you know about in your student cohort, right? And so because of this ability, because of this peer support network that he had built, that allowed him to do it right away.
And I think you bring up a good point as we were talking about like evergreen versus cohort. I think you have to have some mechanism for getting that feedback loop very, very quickly or early on. And certainly I wouldn't recommend doing an evergreen course till you've done at least a couple cohorts with real people so that you are getting that feedback. And so, I think it sounds like Ali did a really good job with like responding quickly enough that, oh, don't worry, like don't get hung up on this. Like I know there was a session where Ali was saying, stop worrying so much about doing the content of the course and worry about doing your homework. Like just do the activity. Nothing is stopping you from pulling out your phone and making a video. Like you have everything you need.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second, because prompting people to action, just taking action, is such an important part of learning. Like learning is doing is learning. And if you get the reason he had said that is because they were getting a lot of feedback from people that, you know, I think in typical Ali style, there was just so much content. There was this like crazy amount of content available. And but that also, you know, almost maybe counterintuitively had the effect of getting people even more anxious, because they're like, they had FOMO. They're like, oh, like I can't attend it all. How do I, you know, I'm missing this session. Is this recorded? Is this blah, blah, blah. And that's why he was like, look, just let's, you know, the most important thing is do the 4 videos. and start to get in the habit of doing this. Do the 4 videos, post them on, actually, yeah, it's more than this, is post them and get feedback and give feedback to others. That's where you're going to do the most learning, and yeah, and I think so you have that as well. Like, you have a community and people are all, sharing their like workflows and Notion dashboards and stuff and giving each other input and feedback in it. And that's, you don't like, and that's the other cool thing is the course creator, that's a great way to leverage your time, right? Because you now have built this community of people that are able to help each other.
Yeah, and that I think takes a bit of time too, right? If people are kind of just starting their courses and it's almost like people are a bit scared to kind of dip in, right? So I'm curious, and maybe Ali has a thought on this too, is getting those almost like people in the audience that you've handpicked where you're like, hey, are you going to participate, to kind of make it easier for other people to participate? Is that a thing that you've seen where you almost want to plant people in your audience to kind of help facilitate that?
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually one of the great benefits of having a sort of a journey network of either mentors or peer supporters set up in your course. And it can be, I think this is applicable to both cohort-based or evergreen or the hybrids on that spectrum, is that you've got people in there who are like, we had this for Rite of Passage, and David would say, like, just for a live session was just to like get the chat going, little things like that. Like, so we would, the 7 of us would jump in and get that going. And you're so right, because it only needs to happen at the beginning. After even like the first week or the first couple of months of running a course or whatever, you don't have to worry about that. But like seeding it's super helpful to have those people.
Yeah, it starts to feed itself. So I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Ali was saying, does this person look like they'd provide value to the community? Yeah, and picking scholarships. Very cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Scholarships. Yeah. What's up, Robbie?
Good to see you.
Yeah. Cool. Sorry, I interrupt you.
No, I know there's like, lots of stuff coming through. So Mushi was asking, community, has it always been a component for you? And if so, what did you use and how are you managing it? I can't imagine that without help. Yeah. And is that, I'm not sure if that question is specific to my course or courses in general, but what's your thoughts on, does every online course need some kind of community component? Do you think you can get away with, or, what have you seen in terms of, there's a community, but only for the duration of the cohort, and then it's kind of closed? Or do you find most people seem to have a bit of a ongoing alumni access community?
Yeah, this is another interesting one, because I think there's business decisions to it, and there's also just the sort of value of the community. I think so. Ali sort of alludes to it there in the comment, like, does this person look like they provide value to the community? That resonates a lot with me, because I'm literally building our first community now for On Deck, and we've got over 170 applications. Probably only going to get to choose about 120 of those to fill a full thing of 150. So it's which is, I think, a good problem to have, right? Because you really get to choose the people that, so with On Deck, especially, one of their things is spirit of service. And I love that. And it really, like, I want to make sure that every person that joins is going to be able to give back to the rest of the community, because that's going to create the strength of the overall community. So being very intentional with the people that you sort of bring in, but also then maybe elevate to these things of like peer support or mentorship. So I think that's a component here. Like Robbie says, with it, be engaged and bring energy. And so I think part of Mushi's question might also be like, what tooling did you use to manage all this? Because that's also
another big question, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like, there's online communities that have online courses baked in, like there's Mighty Networks and Circle, and there's so many things. Are there, one thing I think is really interesting that you've told me is that On Deck is, tech agnostic. It's sort of, these are almost like first principles, regardless of what tooling you're using or even like what kind of course. So that being said, are there some, platforms and tools that you've seen that you think are doing a really good job of kind of enhancing the things that are important about a really great online course experience?
Yeah. So Circle is amazing. I think a lot of the top online courses are using Circle really, really well. I think Slack is also good if you use Slack well. And I've seen, bad uses and good uses of it. But it's also what's also almost as important as what platform you pick is how you set it up. And there's a lot of things, a lot of components to it. Having the ability for people to kind of know where to go when they want to give feedback on something, know where to go when they want to have a question about something. Having this is another cool one. I was chatting to someone who Bamit Patel, who works with the Wes Carl and their team, and we were sort of nerding out about academic papers on learning. And there's a study around how important it is to share small wins to build momentum and to help people, basically build momentum, and to have a small wins channel in your community where people can post. There's actually scientifically backed studies that show why that's important to
that's a great tip
and stuff. So little things like that.
That's such a great tip. And it makes me laugh because in the very first course that I ever did in 2015, it was Digital Strategy School. It was a monstrous mentorship program. It was like a 6-month program. And the very first thing they had to do was fill out this gigantic audit that shows all the places that your business is failing. And so when I worked with this instructional designer, she was like, whoa, this is intense. And you're starting off the course kind of with the opposite of a win, they're actually feeling kind of self-conscious about where they're at. And I was like, oh, of course. So here I was thinking we're going to do this audit. We're going to discover all these opportunities, but it kind of made them feel crummy and then kind of embarrassed and have a bit of shame around their own business, which was the opposite of what I wanted them to feel. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think such a key thing here is to think about it as a journey for students. And so one of the hard parts about doing that, so that reverse engineering the transformation, like we talked about, is that there's a thing called it's the knowledge curse, basically.
Yes.
As you have an intuition that you've built up, you make assumptions, you make leaps of understanding. There's another great study that they did in Chicago, Loyola, called earned dogmatism effect, which literally proves this, that experts have have earned this dogmatism, basically that they aren't able to translate that. That's why it's so hard to be a teacher. Yes. And so how do you get around that? You start to bring the beginner's mindset thing in, fill in the gaps in the leaps of understanding that you make and that you take for granted, and to also get to first principles. And so, so then it's to that point, that audit is probably super valuable, but it might be better as the last thing people do, and sort of you build up to it rather, right? So it's thinking about it as that journey.
Love that. Gail was saying, interesting. When starting a course, I imagine the question would be, am I a person who'd add something of value to the community? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Am I a person?
Seems a huge journey.
Love that. Mike was asking, starting a course versus being an affiliate for someone else's course. He was saying, I have zero desire to start or launch my own course, but I'd love to provide value to courses like PTYA, Notion Mastery, etc. So Mike, was in my course. I know he's in Ali's course. I was recommending it to him. So he's been an affiliate, and I'm trying to come up with creative ways too that other people who are also doing Notion consulting can sell the course alongside their consulting and make an affiliate cut on that too. And so that's kind of an interesting opportunity too, is not everybody wants to go through and be part of the entire creation process. But if you are kind of a social person who often is recommending products and whatnot that you love, and I think there are people in online course communities who are kind of magnetic, right? And they're able to deliver value and connect with people. And so I think Mike is one of those people. And so it might make more sense from a business model perspective to be an affiliate for multiple people's courses and kind of be that champion, right?
Yeah, I think one of the ways I've seen this work really well is alumni of courses sharing their takeaways and their lessons learned and stuff. A lot of people did that with Ali's one, and you may have seen this with yours. I think that's super interesting, because you're then adding value to people, and you're saying, oh, by the way, if you want to go get the full thing, this is where to go.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting opportunity. You see that a lot now. People are like, oh, I'm going to tweet what I'm learning during this course, right? And they're kind of live tweeting it. And I think it's such an interesting way to kind of build your own credibility in a way. Hey, here's what I'm learning and here's what I'm taking away. And then it's just wonderful marketing for the course creators. It's really impressive.
Totally. Yeah.
So Claire here was saying, okay, is it possible to launch a course with no existing social audience? So I'm very curious to hear your 2 cents on this too, especially having taken rite of passage. And then you were saying, oh, I need to be talking about this more. So you were kind of out there tweeting about it, and that's what kind of led you to the On Deck thing. So what are your thoughts on, if you don't really have a social presence, where do you start?
Yeah, so I think my opinion on this has changed a little bit. I would have probably, like 9 months ago, would have said probably not, like no, as an answer to this question. But I was surprised how I started. I started this last year with like 200 followers on Twitter or something, and I'm now up over 2,000. Not that that number itself means anything, but a lot of the sort of the type of people that have come drawn to my account was only through content, right? That's the only way they're going to find you. And so what I found was so first of all, just sharing insanely valuable content, like give away your best ideas, like that. Trust me, it's okay. Like I was very nervous about doing this, but it's totally okay to give away your best ideas, because you know what, the biggest lever is still implementation. People will still want to work with you to help implement those ideas, right? So give away insane value, and then also be open about and build in public, right? And what I did was announce that I was going to start an online course. I think I did that in sort of November, and I only started offering value in October. So this was, so like I said at the beginning, I think it happened super quickly for me, and I feel very grateful for that. But those two things made a huge difference, because I had over 100 people sign up for an email list to say, yeah, I want to know about this online course you're going to be building. And I think, and then obviously how On Deck heard about me and all that. But if the On Deck thing hadn't happened, I mean, now, you know, I'm like ridiculously lucky, because now I can fill 150 cohorts in April, which I never would have been able to do. Yeah, right. but I was totally confident that I could get like 20 or 30 people in April, and that would have been an amazing start. I would have been stoked with that, and then build from there. And you know, maybe in a year or two get to 100, 150 people. But yeah, it's totally doable. I was blown away by how doable it is, and just sharing insane value and build in public. Be very open about what you're building. Like people just want to help. You know, they just want to support you and figure out how they can make it better. You know, so.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's the piece you can't skip, is that providing that insane value in some capacity, whatever that looks like, whatever channel you've chosen, you do have to have some mechanism for sharing that. And in an ideal world, your first contact with someone isn't asking for a sale, right? Ideally, you've already built up that proof because you've shared a ton of stuff, and people are like, oh my gosh, every article this person is posting is like spot on. It's exactly what I'm thinking. So I think, like you said too, it doesn't take a lot to do that initial cohort. And usually I would tell people when they're just launching their first course, like make it invitation only, right? It's like that dozen people that you're inviting to say, hey, I'm building this thing. You've talked about this before. I think you'd be a really good fit. Are you interested in joining me at this beta price, right? And inviting the people. So if you can't think of 10 people that would sign up for your course, I do think some of that audience building, or again, content creation on whatever channels is going to be necessary.
Yeah, totally agree.
I love that. Thanks for asking that, Claire. And again, like Andrew said too, my first course, I didn't even have an email list when I first launched it. It was a 6-figure launch, but I had built so much trust through Facebook groups. So that was my channel. I hadn't been capturing it in email, but for 2 years, I was just being ridiculously generous in Facebook groups. Like, oh, here's a proposal template for that. Here's like just constantly. So when I was like, oh, here I have a course that solves the exact thing I've been chatting to you about for 2 years, people were very quick to sign up.
That's a great one, Marie. Like, I think there's so many amazing communities you can join now. Like, you know, yours, like Nest Labs, Visualize Value, like Community Club. There's so many that you can get involved in, and like you said, just offer to help as much as possible. I know it's something Robbie Crabtree does really well. That's actually a great way to get noticed, to sort of jumpstart a social audience. If you're literally starting at zero, is like go into those communities, because that's where people are super focused on things and sharing you know, challenges they have and stuff. So you can really go in there and channel that value.
Big time. I think, like you said too, with your experience with rites of passage, and like you've met so many people and opportunities that have kind of unfolded as a result of showing up in these online courses.
Totally.
So sometimes I'll show up for an online course because I'm like, that's a community I want to get tapped into, and I want that instructor to notice me. I'm gonna make a connection here, right? So it's a bit strategic. I'm gonna learn from them, and I know I'm gonna show up and just get noticed in this community.
Exactly. Another thing I'd say to people just on this is like, just jump on Zoom calls, like get to know people.
Yes.
Like it feels like it's such a low leverage thing, I guess. Like it's, one-on-one, it takes a lot of time, whatever, but it's so worth it. Yes. You just don't know where that conversation could lead you and who they could introduce you to. And
it's free customer research.
Yeah. Get on calls with strangers. It's
absolutely
amazing. Yeah.
Ronan was asking, what about niche versions of courses, Notion for Teachers? What's your view on niching down? I think niching down pretty specific is probably a really great first way to launch a course that gets noticed, right?
Yeah. Candidates who's applied for On Deck teaches personal finance for Black Christian women. Like super specific, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I was like, that's amazing. Like she, and she meets people like through her church thing. That's how it started. And then she finds communities of people like that. And she's doing great. She's got like a name in that space. And so I think it's just it's such a great way to start. And then you can always then expand from there.
Love that. As Ali always says, niche down to blow up, right?
That's right. The niches and the riches, or riches and the niches.
Yeah. Patrick was saying, how do you decide? Oh, that's such a good question. How do you decide what to make public and what to make paid for content? And I know Ali has talked about this too, where he said, everything in this course you can find online. Like it's not really about the content. And I know, so he puts out stuff generously, and you've said this too, like don't hide your stuff behind a paywall. So do you think of any, and I've heard, I think online course teachers talk about this a little bit of the how versus the what. Like, do you think of content in like, oh, if you're making YouTube videos about that, you can show them the how, but not the what, or I don't know. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the how. So that's actually that's a good way to think about it. The how and the what next. I think of it in four things. So in any piece of any sort of the most atomic level, I think of is like a lesson. So like, and that's one of the steps in the sort of overall steps of your journey, right? And so what you need to be thinking about there is the why. And why is this piece important? Why is this step important? The what's, like, what are some of the concepts behind it that are people then need to figure out how they interact. So, but just talk about the concepts. Then the how and the what next. Those are the big ones, like where you show with tons of examples and experience of how to make those concepts interact with each other in a way that gets the outcome that you can help with. And then what next is giving people recommendations on what to do next. And that's so key. Like if you think about like anything you learn, I think it's probably safe to say, like, you needed someone learning to drive a car. Like you can't just watch someone and then just start driving, right? They need to say like, do this, do that. And you piece it together like that. You focus on the next thing in front of you, and you can help people with that. So that's the biggest part of the value. So I love that you brought that out. I think share the why, the what as freely as you can, even some examples of the how, because where you're going to create the biggest difference for people is in the how and the what next part.
Yeah, and I think I can think of examples where I have followed a creator, everything that they've written and watched all their YouTube videos and just consumed everything. And then I buy their online course. And a lot of it, there is quite a bit of overlap and similarity. And I almost don't care. I'm supporting that creator. I just want to kind of buy in on their worldview and just keep learning from them. So I don't even care if there's some overlap in those concepts, right? You're kind of buying in on the person a little bit.
The person. Yeah. I think I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because there are a lot of really great course creators that are using Notion to teach something.
Right.
And no one's actually just teaching you how to use Notion, right? That's what I love about it. And so you can, I basically have signed up for all of them except K's, and that's like the only one I need to do next. But I've taken your course, I've taken August, I've taken Danny, who I see is in the audience as well, and they're all different. They're all valuable in their own right, which is amazing. And so you can then start to figure out like which the pieces, the best ones of each. How do you view that as well? Like that. Yeah.
Oh,
that it's not
I
zero
love this.
sum, I guess.
Absolutely. Like, I think I know there are people in my course that have taken the other Notion courses as well. Like, I've taken, how many courses have I taken on, permaculture, branding, copywriting, whatever. I don't just take one course on that.
Yeah.
And so some instructors resonate more in terms of their delivery, or like, oh, I got this piece of value out of this course and this piece of value, and awesome. And you just kind of, it's all part of the collective wisdom. And so I think there's so much room for this, similar courses, if you will, in the same niche, and to have different creators, because even though August Bradley and I might teach very similar concepts and even have like a similar YouTube followers, our delivery style, our language, the way we speak, our cadence, like, I know I'm very, very sensitive to people's voices. So I actually don't listen to a ton of podcasts, right? Like, I find I have to really love the sound of your voice, right? Like, and that's something I'm very sensitive to, where other people, it might not matter as much. So if someone feels a bit grating, right? The voice just doesn't quite, it's not warm and inviting, I'm not going to be able to buy that person's course. So the instructors are going to resonate differently, even their teaching style, their approach. So there's room for a more casual instructor. There's room for, I find when people are too formal, right? And it's like, it almost feels like they've got their presenter face on. It's a bit of a turnoff for me, right? And so, but other people will be like, oh, I love their material. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't quite. So that's why I know that there's just room for so many different instructors. So
I think it's an interesting point you make here around that. Robbie and I talk about this a lot, that it's a lot, people buy from people, right? And a lot of what you want to learn, from you or from Kay or from August, like, and that's such a key thing to think about as well. You are, as a course creator, somewhat of a celebrity, right? And that, like, even if it's 10 fans or 100 fans, like, people are doing that because they are looking up to you. There's something about your personality and your way of thinking that resonates with them. And embracing that as a course creator is very helpful. Like, to sort of start to take the next step.
Yeah. And that's where I think when you're thinking about what's free versus paid content, I think the more content that you have out there that shows your worldview and gets people connecting with you, the better. So share that stuff freely and don't overthink it. Better to get it out there and get the free content out there than worry about what's paid.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how are you on time? I know we're past the hour right now.
I'm good. The little guy's still sleeping. So
okay, cool. We'll get some more questions in. Gail was saying, great advice about picking for cohorts. Good signal to do more listening if you can't think of 10 to 12 people, right? Where she was saying the build in public thing always felt like setting up obligations. I think reframing it is just allowing people to help. Yeah, I think there's so much we overthink about where we think we're afraid to market. But if we can think of it as like, who isn't being served when you are not putting your work out there? That's something my coach kind of.
I love that.
Yes, it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah. Who are you not to shine and share your ideas?
Who doesn't get what you need to share? Another one here was about the Zoom thing. I think is such a good, like, that's how things started with Notion office hours. I was just tweeting out my Zoom link. I'm like, who wants to talk about Notion? Just hop on, let's talk. And that's not scalable, but it is free customer research, and it's a chance to connect with your community, get known as somebody helpful. So highly recommend that as a step one if you're like just starting.
Totally. It's a great way.
Let's see if there's any other questions that have.
See, Stephen, Esteban, a few names are recognized. Oh, I love the Zach and Jay's question there as well at the end.
Let's see here. Okay.
Wow, third Andrew Barry session in 7 days, Stephen. I feel sorry for you. I hope I'm not repeating myself.
No, it's great. It's great. So, well, yeah, what's the most important factor to ensure? Yeah, how do you measure transformation in students?
Yeah, well, okay, so I think there's two parts to that. Like I'll think, and this is where Stephen will definitely see some repetition in that. I think there are three main things to think about for ensuring that, and then let's talk about measuring it, because I think that's super interesting as well. But the three big things are having personal meaning. So there are three P's. Helpful way to remember it: personal meaning, peer-to-peer learning, and prompts to action. So real quick, if you can get students to connect with intrinsically why they are doing the course, and reflection, like having reflection exercises are super helpful for this. And so they do that and they share that with you as the course creator. That's a massive, massive piece of information for you to help them get that outcome. So personal meaning, peer-to-peer, we talked a lot about that, the community, the designing intentional ways for people to interact with each other through destination, journey, and accountability groups. And then the prompts to action, I think we talked a lot about that as well. Just do the assignments, or as a course creator, have assignments, structure them in a way that builds that journey, give people ways to post them, share, get feedback from others, sort of ties those three things together. So I think those are definitely the three big high leverage things to think about.
And then what about the measurement piece? What are some ways that we can, like surveys and kind of, how do you track that?
Yeah, so I mean, Charlotte does amazing work around this. I think, so first of all, there is a binary thing, like, did you get the transformation or not, right? And that's important. So did you, or if it's more nuances, did you get what you wanted, what the transformation you wanted at the beginning is? And by the way, you should also be filtering those at the beginning to make sure that's something you can deliver on.
And check against,
yeah. And then, then I love what Charlotte does around thinking through like the proficiencies you want people, and thinking of it as a sort of radar chart of proficiencies that add up to that transformation, and then giving people an opportunity to self-assess on that spectrum. And that really helps to know, because it helps you to like really zero in on where you can create the biggest change, like where the areas you need to focus in on. It helps you see where you've improved the most. And that just really helps with that ongoing journey as well. So yeah, I think that's key, like the proficiencies that make up the overall transformation, and then did you deliver on the transformation?
Love that. Yeah, I think there's a question that I ask folks when they first sign up that's like, what would make this course experience a success for you, right? So having them put in their own words, like what's the transformation that they want, and then working with Charlotte to figure out what's the next step to check against that.
Level down, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Donald was asking, what resource do you recommend for teaching how to help adult learners make a transformation?
Teaching how to help adult learners make. I mean, I'd have to plug the On Deck Course Creators thing here. Like that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Like, and if you want to check on Twitter, I'm Bazaruto, BAZZARUTO. I have a pinned tweet which is 120 tweets long, which is basically all of my ideas around this. So it's a lot of the stuff we've talked about today and everything we include in the course will be in that tweet. So
definitely be covering that.
That's a good starting
point. Awesome. Patrick was asking, what are some of your greatest or unexpected obstacles, and how do you go about overcoming them? Greatest or unexpected obstacles? I
mean, I think the biggest obstacle is always, are you able to create that transformation in people? I think the thing that comes to mind for that question is that I was always wrestling with this idea for the course that I'm doing, is that, creating an online course is such a big thing. So if I have 8 weeks with people and I'm going to teach them how to create an online course, it's very unlikely that they'll see an immediate return on that in the 8th week, right? Like there's time that has to go into doing that, and maybe they only run the cohort, or they see it, by the end of the year, whatever. So I wrestled with that a lot, and I came up with this idea of doing a learning conference week, basically like a showcase demo day thing, where people will also work on a 60-minute version of their course, and then deliver it in this, massive learning conference we'll put on and have all the fellows kind of do that as a way to showcase what they do, and also get immediate feedback, right? So that was something I think is, to me, like one of the biggest obstacles is how can you design a way so that I just think of that thing as a capstone project. Like that's one of the key things to have in a course. But how can you give a way for students to get evidence, their own evidence that they got something out of your course? And so, and I think yours lends itself so well to that, because you've got, people can take the templates, learn about what you're teaching them, and then customize them. And then now they've got a physical thing or a digital thing, but it's like,
right.
a template, and it's like, so they've got proof in front of their eyes, like of having done something. And I think that's the key element.
I love that. Scott was asking, looking good, Andrew. Can you talk price points and the best way to test price points? Yeah, I think this is a great question. Should we look at other courses or just test on our potential customers? I'm really curious, because I'm sure you've seen, you've seen and you've participated in a number of courses at varying price points. So how do you, I guess, get started when you're just thinking of how to price your course?
Yeah, and what's up, Scott? We had a great chat this week as well. So it's such a tough one, and almost everyone struggles with this. I've been working with a guy, and Ali works with him as well, called Robin Waite, and I did a podcast with him as well. For those who want to check out, if you look at, I might be able to find it and pop it in the chat, but his name is Robin Waite, Waite. That's a great starting point to get a bit more nuance to this answer. But essentially, it's about thinking about what the value is of your course. And if you can, so it's almost like as a helpful reference of like, try and quantify what that value might be for other people. That can give you, are you creating $100 value? Or are you creating $10,000 worth of value? And where on that sort of spectrum, maybe it's even higher. That's a helpful, not to say that's your price, but that's a helpful way to think about and quantify your price.
Like hours saved, is it saving someone time? Is it saving someone money? Is it a business investment?
Exactly.
Like there's so many, it's almost like a matrix you could figure out.
Yeah.
And then how do they perceive their own saved value?
Exactly.
Yes, this is a thing I'm willing to pay for because it's going to save me 4 hours of time. I know I'm much more willing to kind of pay more for a course if I'm like, oh, well, if that's skipping me this many hours, I'm very much willing to do that. So that's a good check. Yeah, someone else was asking, how do you know how much to charge? I think you kind of don't really. You kind of have to test the waters and put it out there and see, are people buying? Like in the beginning, I think my course was $297, and then every 100 people that signed up, I increased it by $100, right?
Yeah.
Right. And guess what? People kept signing up. Like more people kept signing up as the price got higher. So I was like, oh, I was clearly way undercharging. Right. Yeah.
And actually, that's one of my favorite things I've seen a lot of great courses do, or people just sort of getting started, is be very upfront about that. Like this is early bird pricing, and once 20 or 30 people have signed up, we're going to go up to this level and this level. That's a great way to also create a bit of urgency and I think but it's transparent, and you're not being sneaky about it.
Yeah, I'm huge on when you're in beta mode too, right? I was super clear. This course is still in progress. You're like a founding member, and you are helping co-create this. So you're getting a super, super discount on this, but now you're able to really craft the course and start to level it up.
Yeah. And I found the link to that episode, so I've just sent it to you.
Amazing.
I don't know if I can
add that to the chat.
Yeah.
I will grab that. Amazing. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I think that Jesse had a question on that as well.
Yeah. I know pricing is definitely a bit of an art, not a science, for sure. And so, if nobody is signing up for your course, I think the tricky thing is there's a number of levers. Like not everybody is great at communicating the value on their sales page too. So you might have an amazing epic course, and maybe you've worked with a cohort of people, but you still have to do the job then of communicating that on a sales page. And so I think if you yourself don't have that marketing experience, I think it's worth, whether it's bringing a conversion rate optimization specialist or someone that understands writing for conversion is really going to help you sell your course.
Copywriting is it's not, I even would say it's underrated anymore. It's such an important skill, right?
Yes. And it's a skill that stacks, right? Like when writing is a skill that will continue to pay dividends, whether it's tweeting or writing or whatever.
Yeah. So foundational.
Gerwin was asking, can you introduce your course in a webinar with more detail? Yes, I should totally. It's been on my list for a while, is to make a webinar about like, what do you actually learn in the course? What does it look like? More of a tour. So that's definitely,
I like that. A tour. That's a very cool way to think about it.
Course tour. Yeah.
Yeah. And you sort of like get a peek behind the scenes of what you're buying. Cause that's often sort of the thing that I think personally that holds me back is like, what actually am I getting like with this? You know, like what does it look like? That's actually a really great idea.
Yeah, thanks, Gerwin. It's been on my list, and I will have to escalate that to the top.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, cool. Let us know if there's any other questions. I feel like we've covered a good chunk of them. And again,
Michael,
people.
Sorry, Mary. Michael brings up a good point there as well. Just like selling over the phone, like that's such a great way to do it, to get in a dialogue with people and find out how they, like, to your point, like how do they perceive your value? Ask questions around that, and I think that's really good.
I know Mike, when Mike filled out his feedback form, he had some really epic feedback and just some really great, like, this was amazing, best course I ever took. And then he had some very, very specific feedback that was like, oh, I think you need your killer feature. Like, so I remember the very specific feedback he gave because it was so helpful, and it's so nice to hear it in people's own words.
Yeah.
So good. How would you so interesting.
Yeah. So this is funny. So I don't know the answer to this question, but I have a funny story in that I had someone. So there's a YouTube channel. I forget what the channel is called. That is teaches Rome, and it's two teenage girls, like a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old sisters that teach this. I met them this week because they've applied to On Deck Course Creators. They are two circus performers in Montreal. Who absolutely blow me away by how like sophisticated they are in Rome and like the internet, and it's
I love that.
It's crazy, and they want to create a course that teaches other kids how to use Rome, which I think is such a great idea. And so, Emmerich, I have the same question as like, I mean, I felt honestly kind of awkward a little bit in the interview because I was like, are your parents okay with this? Like, are they? Who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for this? Like kind of thing. And I just want to, it seems like they are. Their parents are big supporters of them. So
that's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess to some extent you have to have access, to teenagers and be able to kind of get a sense of what is their experience going through this content. Do we need? I don't know. Do you need to lean more on pop culture references? Do you need to be funny, or do you need to be more approachable? I don't know. I'm curious kind of how the vibe.
I would check. They're sort of like I think they even thought about it like this of sort of what their USP was that they know how to create courses for kids, like, or for teenagers, like, and not much. They were like, not many people do. So I think Emmerich, if you can find that channel, I can't remember the name. There might be some good tips in there and how to target or like position it for teenagers.
Really cool. Shashank asking, do you have any tips on finding audiences or strangers to talk about your courses? I know we sort of talked a little bit about like Twitter being a really great channel for, just chatting with other people, forums, other people's courses that have kind of peripheral interests and stuff. But where would you?
Yeah. Also, what's up, Shashank? I had a call with him this week as well. A lot of people are interested in the Course Creators Fellowship that are coming in here. But
awesome.
I think the big one is, and Mike answers this here as well, is just other communities is another one to add to what you were just saying there. Like that's a huge leverage where, and I almost think I sign up for all of those communities now, and it's I think you just got to make sure that you have time to give value to the community and you're not there to pitch. But if you, like you were saying, like how you got started, if you do genuinely just go in there and just help a ton of people, you'll be surprised how much that adds up over time.
I think that's such a simple nugget, but it's like a huge takeaway. Just be generous with your value and ask yourself who needs your course and where are those people hanging out? What forums are they online, right? So who needs what you've got to share? Love that. Yeah. So Mike was saying like Facebook groups, circle communities, Twitter, and sometimes even asking other people, hey, I have a course on X. Do you know anyone or any communities where this would be of value to too? So it's a combination, I think, of the like being out there on social and a bit of warm outreach to people that are already in your network that might already be plugged into communities that would be helpful for you.
Yeah, and I think so. I think to underline this point, it's like, because I definitely used to make this mistake. It's like, don't try to think about volume. Like, you don't want to try and just grow as many followers as you can and come up with like growth hacks to do that, because you're going to get you're going to get crickets back, right? You'll get like, if you have an email list of that you've done that with, you'll have 10% open rates. Like, what you want is an email list of 200 people where 80% of them are opening it, as opposed to like 10,000 where 5% are opening, or whatever. But yeah, that's the key. Like, prioritize relationships versus volume.
Yes, love that. Love that. Yeah, Mike was saying, even if you post a crappy screen share, you can get tons of, oh man, I think about my first, well, even on YouTube, I look at a couple of the very first videos where I didn't know anything about equipment or whatever. And I was just screen sharing. I didn't have any story. Like I didn't know anything about anything. But the content of the videos was still valuable enough that it got the reach that it needed.
Yeah. Right? Well, I think what's interesting, you've talked about this before, that you started like that. You saw that you sort of validated your ideas like that, but then you've also been very intentional then about improving your ability to tell stories, to speak on camera and stuff. Like, why did you prioritize that? And why was that sort of order of things important?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of like, once your stuff is more visible, it's like, oh, I better step up the quality here, right? When no one's paying attention, you're like, whatever, I can get away with just shipping, like just ship it, right? Just ship it.
Right.
That's great in the beginning, but then once you have a lot of people paying attention, I was like, oh, like I for myself want the quality to be better, and I want that word of mouth of people being like, oh, this is, go to Marie's channel. Like, she's the one to talk to if you want to talk about Notion. So if people are already doing that, I almost feel this responsibility to level up the content, make it better, and learn those skills. So I think that's, just like, I know that you're a learner as well. Like, you're always kind of up-leveling your skill set and wanting to improve. Yeah. So I think I just couldn't help myself. I was like, well, if this is going to be a thing that I'm going to get known for, I want to improve all the supplemental skills, the facilitation, running those group calls. Like, how can I make those even better? How can I make the learning journey better? So I think it's just a process of leveling up each time.
And people recognize that, right? They like see that you put effort in, and that also adds, it adds something to the value of that content. And like, wow, this person actually really puts a lot of effort into this.
Cares enough to kind of keep reinvesting in it, right? Like, even the sales page, it's like, at some point I was like, oh, the course is big enough now that I think this needs its own URL. It needs its own kind of life. And so let's build a sales page. So I'm always kind of, leveling it up over time. You got to start somewhere. You got to start small, right?
Exactly. But it's a constant, it's never finished either, right? It's always just, you're always improving it, tweaking it. Yeah.
It's never finished. Yeah, courses. Yeah. I'm curious if you have thoughts on that too, because I mean, that might be intimidating for folks when they're like, oh my gosh, is this just a project I'm going to be working on for forever, for the rest of my life? What does this look like?
So for me, the answer to this comes back to something we talked about, before we even started recording, is that you have to be passionate about this. You have to care about teaching and transforming others, because there's a lot of work in it. It is literally never finished. There are ways, I think, just to address that point, like, there are ways to, like you said, to sort of eventually start to make it run without you. You can start to pre-record a lot of content and have that as an option. You have mentors, you have ways to sort of leverage your time. But yeah, at the end of the day, like, you've still got to put the work in to do that, and you've really got to care about that.
Yeah, it's almost like the course goes through an evolution, or the hope is that you launch a course, but then it almost becomes a business. So in the beginning, it's just a product, but in many cases, it becomes people's business, right? And suddenly now it's a way bigger part of what you're doing.
And I think that's so exciting. We're now seeing the market, everyone's seeing that there's this huge opportunity for online courses. There's this just a massive, and I think we've only scratched the tip of the iceberg for it as well, in terms of where, like, it's still, like, if you think of knowledge workers, people who have jobs, the people that are in online courses with you and I and everyone sort of listening in now are probably most likely like in tech, or, a couple of sort of the sort of highly regulated industries. A lot of them don't even know this world exists yet, right?
Yeah,
so there's this huge, like, untapped demand of people that now, and trust me, like, they're spending their days watching corporate training, which anybody who's worked in those type of industries will know is like the most soul destroying thing to have to do. So, and as soon as they start to see all of this, like, it's going to be a tidal wave. So
so the idea is to
no, so just like that now people who actually care about training and creating like transformational experiences can make this a business. Like, it's a viable income for the rest of your life. Like, it can be your only source of income.
Yeah, and it's going to be a strategic advantage, I think, to understand the difference between just a course and a transformational online course. And I think the skills that you learning how to put together a transformational course they're going to serve you, I think, for the rest of your life. You're going to be able to apply that to anything that you want to teach. So
yeah, exactly.
Maria, I believe you started with writing a lot of your courses. How did that go? Is that a format you still use, or have you moved more into a supplemental format? Yeah, what's interesting is my very first course had no video. It was all text, which is wild, so wild to think about. But I also had one-on-ones and group calls with people too, to kind of bridge that gap. And I had a Facebook group, but the actual material and content itself was all written in my first course. I was like totally scared to be on video. I didn't. Right. This was back in 2015, and now that's like my main channel. That's how people find out about me. So so I'm a big fan now of doing. It's hard to do video well. I find it really hard to do video well. It's easy to be in conversation with people, but to be succinct in a recorded video is like, like the scripting and kind of planning that needs to go into that is holy moly, right?
It's the hardest of all, I think, of all the content to create 100% scripted video. So it just sort of made me think. I think what's interesting now is a lot of course creators are playing around with having options for reading stuff, watching a video or something, or even listening to a podcast. Like, create a private podcast channel that only your students get access to. So now people can go for a run or a walk and like do something else, and listen to your content, and then come and do the assignments, on the computer. And like, it's so you create all these different ways for people to consume the same content, and they almost get a choice, or they do get a choice. And that's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I think I think another thing to be aware of is I think different teachers have different channels and methods that they're strongest at, right? Like, if David Perel is excellent with the writing, like, there may be points in his course where it makes sense for him to lean more on written copy than it is on video. I mean, obviously, if you can do both, you're going to be in a way better spot. And I think not just the course content, but designing the actions, designing the activities, and almost like the homework design itself is like, what is the best activity to get people to do, to kind of, because we know that you said this before, the doing is where the learning really happens. So how do you get them shifting from reading and watching videos into actually integrating and doing? That's the hard part.
That is hard. And one of the most important parts. By the way, I popped another link in there for you as well at some point. I've written a lot more about these. I like that you said this earlier, like, it's the difference between being a course and a transformational course. And I think eventually online will get dropped, and we can, as we go back, like, a lot of these principles apply in person as well. So those people out there that miss that energy of being in a room with people and facilitating and stuff, I think that's still gonna come back and be a part of all of this as well. But
that's awesome. Daniel was asking about what was that course that I had. So I had a program called Digital Strategy School. That was my very first course that I ran in 2015. And it was a 6-month mentorship program. And there was no no video content. It's pretty wild to think about, because it was a $4,500 program and there was no video in there. And I had no list. and it did
yeah.
very well. Like that was my beginning of like, oh my gosh, online courses are a thing.
Yeah.
This is actually a viable business model. How can I make this even more of a thing? And I kind of went headfirst into online courses.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like you said, you got to start somewhere.
Gotta start somewhere. Yeah. How did I learn to get comfortable in front of a camera? What advice would you give for someone who's shy and introvert? We might have talked about this a bit on your podcast, but I did a year of acting classes. I signed up for the Supernaturally Shy Intro to Acting, which was so terrifying.
That's amazing.
I did that. Therapy. I hired a leadership coach. I hired 2 different speaking coaches, or a speech coach and a speaker coach. And then just the number of books, like it's been nonstop learning. And then one of the things that I did was I signed up for the 100-day challenge, where you pick one thing to do every day for 100 days. And so I did a vlog every day for 100 days. And I started practicing by just sending video messages to friends, just like little love notes, just little hellos, just to like get comfortable, like looking at a lens, right? It's a weird experience. So it has taken years of just like exposure therapy, if you will.
Yeah.
It's been pretty wild.
It's so cool. And I love that you talk so much about it. I popped our interview together in there as well. So we definitely dived into this in a big way. Like, I think that's it sort of helps demystify that you don't have to be a natural. Like you can learn anything, right? You actually can learn anything.
Yes.
I think it's very dangerous to believe that you need to have natural talent in something. Like physical talent's different thing, but like you don't have to be a naturally good born speaker. You don't have to be a naturally good born teacher. These are all skills that you can learn.
Absolutely. I was seeing how being shy about being on video, and even again, I've been self-employed for about 12 years now. And in the first couple of years, I wouldn't do Skype calls or Zoom calls. It was always like just wanting to manage projects by email. Like I just didn't want to be on the phone with people. I was definitely much more introverted than I was today. But I was seeing how much it was holding me back. And I thought, okay, if this is holding me back in my life and my business, and I know I have like big ideas for myself and big ambitions, I need to work on this skill. And so I knew it was going to be a process. I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was like, whose help do I need to make this happen? And who can I learn from? Who are the people that I've seen go through that path? So that you're not only looking at examples of people who just look really natural and seem really natural. I'm like, who are other women that I look up to that were maybe shyer, right? Like I wanted to find examples of people that were kind of like me. And I hired a lot of help along the way. And Shine Bootcamp is another one that I'm going to be a mentor for this, be like a mentor coach this year. But that was an amazing boot camp too, of like, it was like a safe place to practice being on stage with another group of women that were also working on their very first talk. So it was like, everyone's like, supportive in the audience, and we got each other's back, and you get to like get a shot of you doing your signature talk in a really safe environment. So whatever opportunity you can find that get you to practice, just do it. Just put yourself out there. You really skip the hard part.
I think another interesting part of what you said is that you have this process of, I think you do sort of annually at least, this process of like reflection to see what you realize that was something you wanted to work on, and then you went and did it. And I think for course creation as well, that's such an important thing, is to do a sort of review of where you are with your course and pick the most high leverage things to work on, because there are so many moving parts to it. And so you've got to take that type of attitude you take to your self-care, also take it to your course care.
I love that. I think that's a really good point too, is that it can be tempting. You're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn. Like now I need to learn about funnels. Now I need to learn about learning journeys and adult learning, and there's a lot. And so I think, one thing I like to think of is every quarter, it's like, what's the skill pack that I'm really focused on for this quarter? And then next quarter, I'm going to focus on something different. So is it video editing right now, and like facilitation? And then maybe now I'm working on my copywriting, but don't feel like you have to do it all at once. You're going to be iterating your way to that improvement.
Yeah, totally. And you won't be able to do anything if you try to focus on everything.
Yes, absolutely. Amazing. Well, I know that we've we've gone well over the hour, and I know we covered a ton of questions. So I want to be respectful of your time, Andrew. So
This has been amazing, Marie.
Yeah, I love chatting about this stuff, and I think others too. Or there's just, as the range of questions has showed, there's just like so many pieces to this process. And so, I invite anyone who's been curious about the On Deck thing to fill out an application if you haven't. Is there anything else that you'd love to kind of tell people about the On Deck program, and maybe when we start and kind of who it's the best fit for? You can give your
I'd love to. And I also popped my YouTube channel in there. I've just started getting going with mine. I've got a sort of editor on my Curious Lion team who's making me look a lot better than I am. But I'll be sharing a lot of these ideas continually every week, basically for the ongoing future. But yeah, so On Deck course creators. So the goal is to make this community, build a global community of course creators that are pushing the boundaries in all of these types of courses we talked about, every part of the spectrum, every topic, clearly every age group as well, because we'll have teenage girls there. It's just
love that.
it's amazing. And so the amount of the diversity of experience and input into best practices, and the sparks are going to fly, when we start to bring everyone together on April 4th, and for those 8 weeks. So I'm super excited about that. I think it's been lacking in that there's always a lot of course creators have gravitated to other communities, tangential communities to sort of what they're doing, like marketing and freelancing and writing. But this is going to be one for people who are working on courses and who, so you don't have to have a course. If you've got, like I said, I think everyone has an online course in them. If you've been able to help one person in some way, you can probably help many. And so that's what we'll sort of help people by teaching. And yeah, I'm just excited to where it goes. And I think the last thing I'll say about it is that I'm going to get to learn from 150 people who teach stuff from, personal finance to Rome to Notion to just like the most crazy diverse set of skills. And that's going to be amazing.
I love that. And I think that's what's so interesting too, is sometimes just seeing another example from a very different industry or a very different course format. You're like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that. And you can kind of pull those ideas into your own course, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, I feel like I have to end on asking you, what are some of the wildest niches that you've seen in the applications? Like, what are some really surprising or interesting, if you're allowed to share them?
Yeah. So, I mean, so the teenage girls in the application said they were circus performers. And so I thought the course was going to be on circus performance. But
you were surprised to know it was
I was like slightly disappointed that it wasn't. But let me see here, because I'm gonna look at some of them. Where is it now? I mean, so we've got a lot of people covering like pretty much every coding language that's out there, which is super exciting. A lot of like softer skills, a lot of mindset type training, which is really interesting. I suppose like the most interesting one is people applying concepts of mindfulness to productivity. There's a lot of that now even NLP as well, like sort of those types of cognitive like things to like practical applications. So it's sort of what you were saying. It's like drawing inspiration from a totally different field and applying it in a new one. So that's pretty, it's those sort of types of combinations which are the most exciting.
I love it. I'm so appreciative that you were able to come on for such a fun conversation. We could nerd out about this forever.
Totally. I want to thank you for having me. This has been so much fun, and for the amazing questions and audience audience participation as well.
Yeah, thanks everybody who came and joined us and asked really great questions. This was awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. And so I think we did post a couple of those links in the chat, but just in case, I'm going to drop that On Deck link in there as well. And you should have recent your YouTube channel, recent podcasts, a couple of resources there.
And come join Marie. She's going to be very, very involved in it. I'm so excited to work with you in this fellowship. Yeah, it's going to be
it's going to be fun. It's like, even though I, have my own course and I've been, teaching it to other people too, I always have so much more to learn, right? So I always want to be plugged into these communities and just kind of see what are the best people doing in this space and what's happening. Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on the internet. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thank you, Marie.